Greetings, Internet. Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about the different types of explanations for the Ice Age. And now, I've made a previous video about the argument that the Ice Age is a myth, and I've made another video about other peripheral topics. Today, though, I'm going to start with this quote from a book called Forbidden History. This is where I first heard about the idea that the Ice Age was a myth that was used to explain evidence, geological evidence for the flood. And it's written by an independent scholar, alternative historian. His name is Peter Brose. This is from his chapter in the book Forbidden History. That is, you'll find that book under Kenyon is the last name. It's each chapter, he's the editor, and each chapter is a different, subject. And a lot of the different subjects are different authors, but sometimes you have like one author writing 4 or 5 different subjects in 4 or 5 different chapters. Anyways, it's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. And this is from Peter Brose. As explorers started to bring home descriptions of the world from afar, science was horrified to see a picture emerging of a planet scarred by massive movements of water, generally from the northwest to the southeast over its surface. The northwestern sides of whole mountains were scored, as if they had been subjected to fast-moving waters containing gravel and boulders. Floodwater was unmistakably the source of this scoring because science could see the same effect from fast-moving rivers. Furthermore, those same sides of the mountains were also home to massive buildups of drift materials, detritus presumably left behind by receding waters. Again, this was an effect that mimicked natural actions in the real world. These drift deposits even contained the remains of animals, including the woolly mammoth. More horrifying to 19th century scientists than the evidence of water damage and silting were the gigantic boulders exposed to public view all over the European countryside in places where they clearly didn't belong. These oversized rocks, many weighing thousands of tons, could have been moved only by the massive floodwaters carrying them along and then deposited them where the waters receded. What to do with these discoveries that constituted irrefutable evidence of a worldwide flood? The task that faced science when it was confronted with the incontrovertible evidence of a worldwide flood was to create a scientific fact that would provide a substitute for the already existing evidence left behind by the actual flood. The naturalist Louis Agassiz, you can tell I read all the time and I never hear these words correctly pronounced. Louis Agassiz, I'm going to go with Agassiz, took disparate facts that led inexorably to an uncomfortable conclusion, a worldwide flood, and then created an idea, the Ice Age, that could be used in place of the uncomfortable flood idea. And then he exclaimed his Ice Age theory to be a scientific fact. Because no methodology can prove an idea, ideas have to be accepted or rejected on the basis of the evidence they explain. The glacier theory did not explain why the scoring labeled striations that supported glacial theory appeared only on one side of the mountains, or why the drifts, called moraines to tie them to glacial theory, contained the remains of animals that were found only in equatorial regions, insects that were found only in the southern hemisphere, and birds that were native to Asia. The glacier theory did not explain why the giant boulders named erratics to accommodate glacier theory were found in desert regions where no glaciers could possibly go. However, because the scientific facts are merely notions, ideas that cannot be disproved, those who present strong visual confirmation of their truthfulness are always both widely and wildly accepted. Once the Ice Age theory was accepted as reality, the only problem that science encountered with the only problem that science encountered was its need to produce a model that would explain how the Earth could undergo vast temperature variation, a task at which it has so far failed. That is where I first read about it. There's more to that than what I just quoted there. And that was a real eye-opening moment for me. I had peripherally, and I hadn't necessarily. I always thought the Ice Age complemented the flood somehow. Like either the melting glaciers caused the flood, or if you read flood geologists, they say that the flood cooled the earth, and that after the flood waters receded, the cooling basically initiated the Ice Age. So one way or the other, they're usually tied to each other. That was the first time where I read, oh, wait a second. Because they couldn't find the source of the floodwaters. It's like, if we're topping the top of the mountains, where is this water coming from? There isn't enough in the atmosphere. There isn't enough in the polar ice caps. And one of the polar ice caps is already in the water, so it wouldn't raise levels anyways if it melted. So that was this huge conundrum. So I was then like, well, it just must be a myth. Well, what about all the geological evidence? Well, we kind of see this same kind of stuff by the edges of glaciers. And then they say, oh yeah, we see these drumlins and this and that. Well, now the drumlins are no longer explained by sheets of ice, but the melting underwater currents of like these basically, I keep saying underwater, it's under ice. So under the glacier, as it's melting underneath first, not on top first. And so there are these huge rivers underneath the glaciers that are well, if that's causing drumlins, for example, you can't tell the difference between a water carved and an ice carved, because the ice is now being carved by water. You just have either miles of water on top of it or miles of ice on top of it. It's still water carving it either way. So you start looking into all this, and then you start seeing that like if you look at my previous video, all the glacial evidence is better explained as flood evidence. And now we found the water. Like we now know, oh look, there's 8.5 times the total amount of water in the oceans locked in the mantle, either in the lower mantle or in the transition zone between the upper and lower mantle. So it's like, oh, there it is. There's that water. And then they get into so there's like 29 different explanations for the Ice Age cycle. Nobody knows. Nobody has a clue what causes the Ice Age cycle, but I'll just list half of these 29. And they are: the passage of the solar system through regions of space filled with cosmic dust or gas. Yeah, that could do it, right? The precession of the equinoxes. That's so the Earth has its orbit, which is how it spins. Like if you had a globe in front of you, if you just spin the globe, that's a day, right? And then if you do this with the globe, that's a year, right? Going around the sun. And then if you twisted it on its axis, that's the precessional cycle. It slowly turns like a top. Sometimes if you spin a top, you'll see it as it's spinning, it'll hit this axis, right? And it'll start going like this on the axis, but the top's still spinning. So if you take the Earth and do the same with the globe, that's the precessional cycle, and it's 25,900 and something, 960 years or something like that. So that's a theory. Like that causes the Ice Age, right? Tidal variations. What causes those tidal variations is apparently in somebody's theory. Warm springs. So warm springs can explain, like, have been used to explain the ice ages. Wandering poles. That's a really weird phenomena. The poles, like people don't know this. So they always say, oh yeah, there's an 11-year solar cycle. It's actually not an 11-year cycle. The solar cycle is almost never 11 years. It's either 10 or 12, but the average is 11. But that's there's a polar shift that happens, and it's I believe the Hale cycle is a full flip. So a half flip, like when the north becomes south, is happens every 10 or 12 years, and then another flip happens another every 10 or 12 years. So that's a Hale cycle. So the Earth does something similar, but on a much larger, like the sun's plasma. The sun is an incredibly hot ball of plasma. The Earth is very, very cooled and has maybe some plasma down below, but so it's a much slower pole shift phenomena. So these wandering poles could be an explanation for it. Drifting continents have been used to explain. And I guess that one would just mean the evidence we think we see as the glaciers coming down to equatorial regions or near, the tops of the equatorial zone. Maybe that's just all drifting continents and it's not really coming down that far. Orogenic phenomena. I don't even know what that is. Orogenic phenomena. I guess that's been used to explain it. That sounds like William Reich came up with that idea, if you know about his theories. I guess that's Oregon. Never mind. Changing land-sea distributions. Shifting ocean currents. I could see shifting ocean currents being an explanation. Changes in solar radiation. That one seems to be an obvious choice. The sun fluctuates, and so if the sun dims a little bit, like you don't need to go through a cloud of cosmic dust to dim the sun, but a volcano could do that, and I'm sure that's going to be on one of these here. Atmospheric carbon dioxide, volcanic dust in the atmosphere. There it is. So a volcano can, because that's the explanation for the mini ice age that occurred. When did that occur? I want to say that was in the Middle Ages sometime. I don't know exactly when that was, but I recently Googled that, or I recently did a search for that on YouTube, and like everyone's saying now that that's a myth. And I'm like, why would they say that? And I was like, oh, because that contradicts. I can't even say a word. If I say a certain word, the AI is going to flag this with a box like it did on my last one, so I'm not going to say it. But pollution in the atmosphere, which is basically what a volcano creates on a much more massive scale than mankind can do, dims the planet. The scientists in the 70s were right. So that's all I can say. I can't say anymore. I mean, like, this is YouTube. We live in that world, right? Changes in atmosphere circulation. Okay. That could cause an ice age. Yeah, jet streams are changing, maybe. Sure. Change in the obliquity of the ecliptic. I don't know enough astronomy to really get into that one. So that's 14 explanations. The one we currently are accepting by consensus is the Milankovitch cycle. And here's I guess that's based on like 3 orbital variations caused by the moon and the planet and whatever. Moon and the planets and something else. So this astronomical theory suggests that the periodic differences in the Earth's orbit around the sun cause slight changes in the intensity of the sunlight reaching the Earth. The gravitational, the moon and the other planets cause 3 orbital variations. The details are I'm going to spare. However, many serious problems have been overlooked in the uniformitarian establishment's enthusiasm for the Milankovitch cycle. The desired results are actually the consequence of radiation-sensitive initial conditions, such as ice sheets already in place, uncertain values for input variables, and by inexact statistical representations and other poorly understood variables in the models. So we don't know what causes the ice age. We have no clue. And that's hard to know. Like, it isn't, science is stupid. It's just that the magnitude of the problem is so huge that it's so difficult to figure that out. So when you're dealing with chemistry and things in this world, you can change a lot of conditions and figure things out and do the scientific method. It's hard to do the scientific method on the astronomical level, as well as the subatomic level. So That's all I got for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.